Right now, the United States is blockading Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran demands full recognition of its sovereignty over the waterway. The tankers trapped in the standoff represent the scale of the global trade at risk. The strategy relies on what's known as gunboat diplomacy, the assumption that a visible display of dominance will force a quick capitulation. But the geography of the Strait of Hormuz creates a unique constraint. This is a maritime choke point, a vital corridor where vast volumes of trade are physically forced into a narrow, limited space. Because these straits function as global bottlenecks, the temptation for powerful nations to assert control over them is constant. However, history suggests that the expectation of a fast victory inside these specific bottlenecks often overlooks the tactical reality of the terrain. The 1915 Gallipoli campaign serves as a cautionary mirror for the current crisis in the strait. In early 1915, Allied forces assembled a massive armada for a purely naval operation. The goal was to force a path through the Ottoman-controlled Dardanelles to keep their Russian allies supplied. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, championed the plan as a sideshow that could be called off at any time, despite deep reservations held privately by other military leaders. That pattern of decision-making, where a strategy is driven by a single dominant figure while ignoring local intelligence, is reflected in the erratic maneuvers seen in the 2026 blockade. Naval warfare changes from the open ocean to a strait. In open water, a warship's defensive radius is its greatest asset. In a narrow channel, that distance vanishes. Ships become constrained by the shoreline, making them vulnerable to cheaper land-based weapons. This played out in 1915, when Turkish defenders used coastal artillery and a single mine layer to disable nearly a third of the advanced Anglo-French fleet. Current U.S. strategy faces a similar geographic hurdle, as it relies on naval presence in waters where Iran holds the defensive advantage. Today, drones and missiles skimming low over the water replace old artillery, allowing weaker states to contest the seaways against far more sophisticated navies. Overwhelming naval superiority is effectively neutralized by the physical constraints of a choke point. When an initial naval push fails, powerful states rarely choose to retreat. Instead, they often scale up their efforts to protect their prestige. In 1915, this led to a shift to the shore. Allied ground troops were ordered in to destroy coastal guns the Navy couldn't silence. What was meant to be a quick passage turned into 8 months of hand-to-hand trench combat and suicidal assaults. This escalation, often called mission creep, is the result of matching inadequate initial resources against a fiercely entrenched opponent. The 2026 blockade is positioned on this same threshold. If the initial show of force fails to resolve the crisis, the pressure to escalate toward a ground conflict becomes immense. The human cost of the Gallipoli campaign was 483,000 casualties, ending in a forced withdrawal. The current conflict in the strait has already resulted in civilian casualties, moving the war beyond purely military targets. Beyond the direct violence, a prolonged conflict in this corridor threatens to disrupt global energy and fertilizer supplies, creating economic shocks in the world's most vulnerable regions. The political calculation for an easy win willfully ignores these wider human and economic consequences. A century ago, empires could draw their allies blindly into battle. Today, sovereign nations have the right to make their own decisions. For countries like Australia, the 2026 crisis should be viewed through the evidence of Gallipoli, rather than through blind allegiance. History shows that disputes in maritime choke points are rarely solved by military force alone. In narrow waters, there is no such thing as a quick war.